I would like to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and I would like to thank TÜBİTAK and Simon Gächter for funding our research. So, yes, so the earthquakes after 20, in 2023 has damaged our country in a lot of ways. Over 60,000 people have died, and hundreds of thousands of people were affected in other ways, such as being displaced for their homes or having economic losses, such as losing their houses. Uh, but we were all indirectly affected by the earthquakes because of the coverages we have seen on television, social media, or our relatives were affected by these earthquakes. So basically, we can see the effects of the earthquakes on everyone. Everyone has seen the news. It's effectively affected us in our emotional states. People have donated money to charities or directly to people. So this was a big issue in Turkey, especially in the terms of upcoming presidential elections, where the government was praised and at the same time criticized for their answers. I do not want to deliberate much on the literature because effectively it is the same literature as Eli does, and we are running out of time. But we can see that there is a specific literature on natural disasters, on voting behaviors, on risk-taking behaviors, or as Yiğit has said, about trust in governments, or the context whether you are personally affected by the earthquakes or natural disasters, or whether you were indirectly affected by the natural disasters. Additionally, political psychology literature mostly focused on mortality and terror threats. And they mostly use the intentional measurements, but in our research, we use both intentional and actual behavior measurements. Also, most of the studies were conducted in weird societies, but in our research, we conducted the study in non-weird settings, as well as using the effect of real earthquakes, not hypothetical earthquakes or other types of threats. So these two variables increase the importance of our research. In our research, we wanted to see whether earthquakes and the video manipulation of earthquakes we have developed change earthquake risk perceptions, which is the manipulation check of our research, cooperation and donation donation behaviors, cooperation and generosity behaviors. As well as the moral sensitivity. And we will see that these three things are actually different and they have their qualitative differences between them. We have cross-sectional analysis and longitudinal analysis. First, in terms of longitudinal analysis, we wanted to see the difference before and after the earthquakes regarding pro-social behaviors and moral sensitivity. In terms of cross-sectional differences, we wanted to see how earthquake manipulation affected those pro-social behaviors and attitudes. We also measured the effects of moral messages, but since our time is very limited, I will not be able to talk about those. We expected moral sensitivity and pro-social behaviors to increase after the earthquakes. But since the results of the first study did not match our expectations, we changed our expectations in second measurements to match those. We will be talking about the results of the first and second study. In terms of participants, we faced similar problems taken in Turkey because our research sample was young, female-oriented, it mostly consists of center-left voters and urbanites. For risk perception scale, we used the scale that was measured in the same project but in a different study. It has 7 questions which measures both objective and subjective risk perceptions. Dictator game measures the generosity behaviors. In dictator game, there are 2 participants. Participant A has 100 Turkish liras, and he has the option to, or she has the option to donate this money to the other participant or keep the money to himself, regardless of what he or she decides. So the amount of money he decides to give, for example, 20 liras, forms his generosity scores. In public goods game, there are 4 participants, and there's a collective money pot. Each participant make a decision on how much money they wanted to give to the public pool. And if everyone gives all the money, then everyone is very advantaged by the situation, because this money is doubled and redistributed. But if you take your money to yourself and others donate, then you will be the most advantageous, while others are disadvantageous. So it depends on the decisions people make. Morality cooperation measures the moral sensitivity and demographic form, includes information about participants' age, gender, education, socioeconomic status. Data was collected online using Qualtrics at 3 time points: before the earthquake, 2 months after the earthquake, and 6 months after the earthquake. And participants were randomly assigned to either earthquake manipulation group or the control group, where they watch a video about arts and crafts. First, they played the economic games in a random order, then morality as cooperation scale, then objective and subjective earthquake risk perception scale, then demographic form. So I want to draw the results on the table to make it more understandable. This is cooperation. First time, second time, third time. So it increased right after the earthquakes, 2 months after the earthquakes, but it dropped between 2 months after the earthquake and 6 months after the earthquake. Whereas in generosity, these two things both measure prosociality, but measure different kinds of prosociality. There was an increase between before and after the earthquake, but this was not significant. But this kept going. This kept increasing 2 months and 6 months after the earthquake. So when we compared before and after the earthquake, we saw a significant difference. Earthquake risk perceptions also increased between before and after the earthquake, and it remained stable 6 months after the earthquake. And lastly, moral sensitivity increased after the earthquake and remained stable. So we see qualitative differences between these 3 things. We see that cooperation increased sharply, but then dropped. Why we see that? Probably because after the earthquake, you need to cooperate with others to have immediate results. Cooperation requires like affective states where you have to immediately help someone, but after 6 months, that urgency drops. In generation, there is an affective state, and this feeling of empathy is still needed for being generous. When you see people, still needing help in terms of money, you can still feel that 6 months after the earthquake. But if we are trying to get people out of debris of the earthquakes, then this need is more important and more urgent. So that's the difference. In terms of moral sensitivity, we think that this dropped because of the Bandura's moral disengagement. So in terms of protecting yourself psychologically, you need to separate yourself from the situation. And there was no effect of earthquake manipulations because the earthquake itself was already very strong, so it did not add additional magnitude. We already talked about why the manipulation did not work. Possible explanations include ineffectiveness of the manipulation itself or the scaling effect. We saw increase in cooperative behaviors and earthquake risk perceptions, as well as the generosity behavior 6 months after the earthquakes, which signals that it's mostly consistent with the literature. We did not initially find significant differences in generosity behaviors, but later we saw that. And I explained why these qualitative differences between pro-social measurements may occur. I think our research is important because we measured a threat that is under-measured in literature, because they mostly measured terror and mortality threats, but we measured earthquake here, and we measured the effects of the earthquake in terms of real earthquakes, not hypothetical earthquakes. So there are studies that were conducted after natural disasters, but taking measurements before and after a disaster is less common in the literature. So I think that's why our research is important. And it shows that there is high external validity. We measured both intentions and behaviors and showed that there could be differences between intentions and behaviors, as well as different types of behaviors, such as cooperation and generosity. So this shows methodological diversity. Lastly, we took measurements from Turkish participants, which derived from the weird populations that are mostly seen in the literature. So we did further studies after these studies, and we saw that after 12 months of the earthquake, 18 months after the earthquake, the effects were similar. We did a research with we measured different types of earthquake threats. We measured we looked at its variance and framing, such as economical loss versus loss of life. We could not find a difference, and this study was done with a high sample and representative of Turkish samples. In this research, we could not find the effects of moral, consistently find effects of moral messages on cooperative behaviors. But when we did another study, we found that there was a general difference before and after coming across moral messages, and utilitarian message was the strongest. Thanks, everyone.
Questions?
Just out of curiosity, was the original intent of this study to look at the effect of the intervention, and just coincidentally 2 months later there was a major earthquake?
Coincidentally, the original, unfortunately,
You didn't cause the earthquake.
well, if I have those powers, I would not be here. So our intention was to measure, make measurements of, earthquake. We wanted to, develop earthquake manipulations and wanted to develop effective manipulations that are scarce in the literature. So in our laboratory, we are trying to make manipulations of different kinds of threats and want to see whether they are effective, and we are having problems with that. But when we make measurements before and after a real threat, we find effects. So maybe there's a problem with validity of the manipulations of natural disasters. So this was basically a chance-based research.
In Turkey, if you randomly collect data at any data points, you would have something in between, right? Like it's not even by chance. There's always something, and it's related to also like my comment/question is about the other study. We are not experiencing only one crisis, but multiple crises at the same time. It's like the earthquake plus terror plus, I don't know, like economic and severe economic losses, etc. So I feel like it's not that easy to argue that. Of course, there's always some historical things, but in such a non-weird, but also multiple crisis environment, it's even more difficult to argue that this is because of terror or because of earthquake. Don't you think so? So in a weird sample, like if a terror event happens just once in a while, okay, this is the effect of terror. But in Turkey, it's a little more difficult, I feel.
I definitely agree, and it is true for, I think, every research in Turkey. But also, when we are doing research, we have to focus on like the little variance we can try to measure. So when we are comparing two groups in terms of an IV, we see changes, but that's a change like maybe like 5% of difference. So I definitely agree with your assessments. I think this is kind of a like general problem as psychological researchers.
But maybe you can report some of the other events that has happened during those time periods. I'm quite sure that there were some like important events that happened simultaneously, right?
Probably.
And, like there was an election at least, I think, if I'm correct, right?
Our first measurement 2 months after the earthquake, it was before an election. 6 months, yes, it was after an election.
So you explained the increase in cooperation after 2 months of the earthquake with an affective state, right? An increase in affective state.
It's in terms of like increased alertness. I think this is better framing from me. Like you become alert to help people because you see like people are under debris, like they are literally going to die if you don't help, or if you don't help people, they will freeze to death if you don't send money.
But so, you didn't see an increase in generosity after 2 months of the earthquake.
Yes, because in terms of generosity, we can expect a general empathy versus like the immediate alertness. Like generosity still continues on, or its increase is still because we can think that like people still need help 6 months after the earthquake, but they are not going to die because you immediately didn't help. Generosity is more related to overall empathy. So I think that could be the difference between those two.
So do you think that cooperation has like a behavioral aspect to it in terms of like you said, helping people to get rescued from under the debris or something?
I think so. I think that's, I'm open to other interpretations, but I think that's the case.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.